Passion. Let's take a quick look at your week 4 assignment 3 drawing. It's a great amount of detail in this drawing, and I thought that you're doing a good job of kind of keeping things very evenly kind of spaced in terms of the cabinetry. It's really easy to understand when you're looking at this back cabinetry how everything is kind of being broken down, and there's, like I said, a nice amount of detail between the nice kind of reflective surface on the glass, which is a really nice touch that feels very, very realistic, to having handles on each of the counter drawers down at the bottom and a nice texture on the countertop for the island for the bar. And it's just got a nice kind of flow to it and it feels like a good solid kind of structure that not that it's actually well made structure in real life, but I think the way that you've built it in the drawing, it feels like a good solid structure because of the perspective. I think proportions as well, it feels very symmetrical from the left to the right. So those things really count because they help to make things feel realistic. Those are things you have to keep a really close eye on, because if you don't, if things are uneven, if lines aren't vertical like they should be, then it tends to make it feel wobbly. It makes it feel less convincing. So a nice job with that overall. There's a few kind of really minor things here. The crunch berries, you need to make sure your vertical line is completely vertical, and the perspective in general feels very off. It's getting a little bit bigger as it's kind of moving towards the left, where it should actually be getting a little bit smaller. I think for me the bigger concern is that the entirety of the drawing is relegated to these kind of golden brown hues, and I think that for some of it works out really well because it feels like a nice kind of rich wood texture. But the problem that I'm running into is that it's very easy for elements to bleed right into completely different elements, and I think that starts to affect the overall clarity of the drawing. So for example, you have a really high amount of differing elements, angles, overlapping things occurring in this kind of corner. The floor is the exact same color as the wood that's back here, and it's very similar in color to the refrigerator, I'm assuming, over here, and that's also the very kind of similar in color to the bar, the wood at the bottom. So you have 4 different elements. You have kind of a front-facing element, a side-facing element, a front-facing but that's closer, and then you have kind of the ground plane, and they all have a very easy way of kind of mushing together. And so what happens is that you lose a lot of contrast, for one, because there's not anything that stands out from anything else. Everything feels very much the same. So that kind of blends everything together in kind of a general sense. But then I think when we're trying to take a look at specifics, it becomes harder to focus on things because the color is so similar, the value is so similar. So it's nice that kind of the countertop is darker and has a texture because it stands out, but it's very easy for everything else to kind of lump together, and it's difficult for me to kind of pick out certain things. I think that you could do things that could help, like make a different value for the ceiling than there is for the wall, make a different value for the ground plane than it is for, say, the cupboards in the back. There's some things like here where I think you're attempting to get a texture in place, but it's not coming across clearly what you're intending for that. So that becomes a little bit of an issue too, although it does help to distinguish things. It feels a little bit rough, overall. I think some coverage issues as well. Feels a little rough on the wall and the ceiling, where colored pencil to me isn't integrating quite as well as it could with the marker, and we're seeing a lot of kind of mark making with the marker itself, so that might also be kind of helping. This isn't everywhere though. I mean, this coloring in and the filling in of the cabinetry feels good. It doesn't have kind of the unevenness that I think kind of over here does or over here does. So it's not like it's predominant throughout the entirety of the drawing, but I do think there are areas where it becomes a little bit of a problem. But I think in general just a little bit more contrast or a little bit more distinction could be used to help separate things a little bit more. But it's a really nice job. There's a great amount of detail going into place. I think the perspective, other than a few isolated areas, is very solid, and it's a really nice job.